Hour again with a Fox News alert. After 675 days, Robert Mueller's Russia investigation is finally over.
On Friday afternoon, Attorney General Bill Barr, who was recently confirmed, sent a letter to Capitol Hill, to the Senate Judiciary Committee and the House Judiciary Committee, indicating that he has the report. It is finished, and he will be briefing relevant chairs and ranking members of those committees this weekend.
Always a Friday afternoon, which we appreciate here on Fox and Friends Weekend. So we get the news. We've got it all morning for you. Here's a couple of things to remember. This special counsel investigation has been going on for 675 days. Total cost to you, $25 million. Total indictments, 34 people. Now remember, 26 of those are Russian nationals who will probably not ever leave Russia.
And three
no
Russian
justice
firms
for them.
as well.
And three Russian firms. Total indictments about collusion, 0, including the President of the United States, which is what so many in the left, so many invested in this investigation were hoping would happen, that would prove Russian collusion. When Bob Mueller delivers his report to Bill Barr, which he did, and we're going to learn more and more about what's actually in the report. There was no additional indictment, which means they're not charging collusion, which means we're not sure what we
should have known
found.
something was up. It was 2 or 3 days ago. Chris Hayes on MSNBC came out and said, if Mueller doesn't find collusion, can we really trust this report? Can we? After 2 years of many in the media sort of puffing this up and saying that this was going to be their great hope in terms of taking down President Trump, number one. And number two, let's not forget, you can't say this enough, leading Democrats, these are chairmen of important committees like Adam Schiff, said 2 years ago, not that there might be collusion, but he said, I've seen evidence that there was collusion with Russia. That is not true.
And you had the fired Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe, who has been referred to the D.C. U.S. Attorney for a criminal investigation for lying, saying that President Trump may be a Russian agent, not just someone who colluded with them to win the election, but in February last month saying he may be a Russian agent. So that's where we are this morning with those claims.
Pay special attention to how those who have been invested in this investigation move the goalposts. Even just yesterday, they're saying, well, you can't let the White House get a sneak peek. The President Trump can't get a sneak peek at this report. We got to hear it first. Or, well, let's see what else comes out. Bob Mueller's got to come to Capitol Hill and testify now. Is Bob Mueller credible? Was the investigation compromised? These are the types of things you're going to continue to hear. But we've been, I think, I don't speak for anybody, but if you've been watching news for the last 2 years, you've been hearing Russia, 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 Russia. And it's almost like you want to have a sense of relief, but you almost, my feeling is it enough already? Okay, finally the report is in. We've known it's a joke from the beginning. Okay, now let's see what happens.
Well, according to Congressman Adam Schiff, it's not going to be over.
Yeah, that's right.
If necessary, we will call Bob Mueller or others before our committee. I would imagine that the Judiciary Committee may call the Attorney General before its committee if necessary. At the end of the day, the Department is under a statutory obligation to provide our committee with any information regarding significant intelligence activities, including counterintelligence. And it's hard to imagine anything more significant than what Bob Mueller has been investigating. We have a right to be informed, and we will demand to be informed about it.
We'll see what is made public. We'll react to that. And as I said, if it is not made public in its entirety, we will we'll use a compulsory process. We'll subpoena the report, and if necessary, we reserve the right to call Mueller before the committee, or maybe even Barr before the committee.
Obviously, Nadler there, Jerry Nadler, is the Democrat who chairs the House Judiciary Committee. Important because he would oversee any impeachment process if that were to move forward.
And impeachment has certainly been part of the narrative here when it comes to what Democrats were hoping this report would provide. They thought it would provide indictments and crimes they could use as evidence to move forward with impeachment in the House. Nancy Pelosi, for a couple of weeks, has tried to tamp down expectations on that narrative, as we've seen and heard that maybe this report wouldn't bring much. And as we know now, the Justice Department will not have any further indictments, according to the special counsel.
That's right. Well, let's bring in somebody who knows a lot about this. Alan Dershowitz, Harvard Law Professor Emeritus, the author of the book, A Case Against Impeaching Trump. Well, did the case against impeaching Trump just get better? What do you know right now, Professor?
Well, no question. It got better legally. Legally, we now know there will be no more indictments from the special counsel. But be wary. This will be a one-sided report. It will draw every conceivable inference against the president. They did not hear exculpatory evidence. The witnesses against the president were not cross-examined. That's why I called for the Attorney General not to release the report immediately, but first turn it over to the Trump defense team, let them write their rebuttal, let them be issued simultaneously, let the public then be able to judge the adversary process rather than looking at a one-sided report. So I think it's too early for the president to celebrate. He's off the hook legally, as we all knew he would be. You can't indict a president for firing somebody who he is entitled to fire, and there's no such crime as collusion. But he's not off the hook politically, and I think this report will be very, very critical, and it must be answered. You know, I'm doing an introduction to a volume of the report, and I will certainly apply my critical ability of 50 years of practicing criminal law to look at what the conclusions of the report are, and also I will wait until the Trump legal defense team has an opportunity to respond so that I can evaluate both sides and give my readers and the American public a real sense of whether this is a strong or a weak condemnation of the president. But it will be a condemnation of the president.
So, Mr. Dershowitz, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer in the Senate have already said that Congress should get a first look at this report before the president does. Can you explain that this is a separation of power issue when the executive branch owns the report? Does the president have a right to see it before Congress does?
Definitely, yes. Number one, the president is the executive branch. Number two, basic fairness requires that. You don't send a report, which is one-sided, over to your enemies in Congress without having the subject of the report have an opportunity to respond. The Democratic members of Congress don't want the president to respond. They want the news cycle to get out there. Oh, these are the accusations. These are the terrible things he did. And wait 2 weeks or a month, maybe you'll hear the other side. That's not the way due process or fairness should operate. So let's take a deep breath. Let's understand this is a long process. If it takes another few days, it's much better to hear both sides of the issue before jumping to conclusions or rushing.
Speaking of jumping to conclusions, for a couple of years, many Republicans allied with the president have been going after Robert Mueller. They may now like Robert Mueller a little bit more.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think there's still going to be some criticism of Mueller's one-sidedness. We have to wait and see. And I do think the Democrats will find some things in the report to seize on. The report may also give a kind of roadmap for further investigations by the Democrats in the House, by the Southern District of New York, and by others. So this is the end of one very important phase of the investigation. But it's not the end of the entire investigation. The Democrats are determined to go, you know, slice by slice after the president through 80 subpoenas, 15 investigations, make it impossible for him to govern. I predict here that there will be a court case against Congress for misusing the authority of their investigation. Remember, they're supposed to investigate for purposes of legislating. I remember, I'm old enough to remember the McCarthy period, when right-wing Republicans misused House Un-American Activities Committees not to legislate, but to expose. And that's not a proper function of Congress.
On that point, let's take a look at some in the media, but some Democrats as well, who made it seem like they already had the evidence and the president was going to go to jail. Watch.
The picture of Russian collusion is coming into focus.
President Trump could be indicted and possibly face jail time after he leaves office.
This is evidence of willingness to commit collusion.
I think they're all going to end up together in prison.
We're at a very dangerous moment. And that's because we are looking at the possibility that the President of the United States and those around him during an election campaign colluded with a hostile foreign power.
We're hearing a new word, right? He said it was treason.
And again, Adam Schiff said he had evidence. He's not just, you know, somebody in the media, a pundit or something. He's a chairman of the House Intelligence. Why is there no accountability?
No indictment from Mueller, but plenty of indictment from the media and Democrats.
Yeah, and, you know, I have to tell you, with all due modesty, I have been right from the very beginning. Everything I've predicted about this apparently has now come true. And some in the media should be looking at themselves in the mirror and say, we owe the American public an apology. There is no obstruction of justice. There is no unlawful collusion here. There is no treason. There is no impeachable offense. So fess up, folks. Admit you were wrong and that you misled the American public. And admit that maybe I was right, even though I've been condemned all over the place for being a kind of Trump accolade. You know, I'm a Hillary Clinton liberal Democrat. I just call him as I see him, and I think I called him right this time.
Well, someone else who's called it as they see it is the president of Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton, who's been at the forefront of exposing corruption within the FBI and the Justice Department. Tom, good morning. We want to get your response to the Mueller report being done and where we go from here.
Well, the political consequences of any dossier-like garbage that Mueller's partisans try to put into the report aside, it's a major vindication for the president. The fundamentals behind the Mueller appointment, the collusion story, has collapsed. And I know Democrats are going to argue about transparency, and we're going to have transparency. That's a side argument. But President Trump is much better off today than he was yesterday. And in my view, we need to move on, but not from accountability here, because, you know, we've had this operation by Mr. Mueller going on for well over a year now unnecessarily. They concluded, I will guarantee you, they've had no substantial evidence since a year plus ago that there was any Russia collusion. Certainly there was no obstruction. Yet this operation was allowed to distort our constitutional republic for a year plus and harass the president and impede on his duties as president, impact the conduct of our foreign policy, all as part of a Democratic Party operation. And for the Democrats in Congress, in my view, they're as conflicted as anyone else involved in this attack on President Trump. Because remember, it was their party, the Democratic National Committee, that concocted this dossier that was the fundamental basis not only for the Mueller investigation, but the improprieties by the Justice Department and the FBI in terms of the spying and other activities targeting President Trump.
Paid for by the DNC and the Clinton camp.
Well, exactly. So, you know, their party's credibility is on the line here. So their cries about transparency are should be taken as anyone else with a conflicted interest in this.
And you know who else's credibility is on the line? The FISA court. Now, the FISA court, many of us civil libertarians have been concerned about it because it hears one-sided information. It trusts the government to tell the truth. Now we know the government didn't tell the truth. It withheld critical information. I want to see the FISA court itself open up an investigation of the people who submitted the report for contempt of court.
James Comey, people at the Justice Department
who was responsible for not disclosing the source of the dossier misled the court. If I were representing a defendant, I'd be up there in 2 minutes seeking contempt proceedings, seeking to strike it, seeking to invoke the Fourth Amendment. But the American public must be able to trust that FISA court.
Tom, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, but quickly, the president now needs to take steps to be transparent there. Mueller, there's no more excuse in terms of interfering with the Mueller operation. And frankly, Alan, I disagree slightly. The FISA court has been part of the problem here. We exposed how, despite the government coming in and asking for 4 spy applications targeting President Trump and his team, they held not one hearing about it. And they know what's been going on here, and they've taken no steps. So we just have to figure out a better way in terms of allowing the executive branch to conduct these so-called spying operations while providing a check. The courts have provided no check, and it's part of the problem.
Look, I've made a suggestion. The FISA court ought to appoint 4 lawyers who get security clearance, who act as the devil's advocate. You know, when the Catholic Church wants to make somebody a saint, they appoint the devil's advocate to argue the opposing point of view. That's what ought to happen here. 4 people with security clearance coming in and saying, no, 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 you shouldn't issue this report. This application is flawed. Today, you don't have anybody on the other side. So the one good thing about this whole thing is you conservatives are now becoming civil libertarians. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for finally seeing the light.
I want to get to Tom real quickly on what Democrats are saying. Brian Fallon, who worked for Hillary Clinton in 2016, has said, look, The Mueller report may be ending. This is what he tweeted. Whatever is in the Mueller report, it ain't over till the Southern District of New York.
But he wrote
Sovereign District of New York.
It
It's
is
the
sovereign.
Southern District of New York sings. So Democrats are now banking on the Southern District of New York, bringing charges against the president and his associates. What do you have to say about that?
Well, the abuse, the baton was handed over in terms of abuse from the DOJ and FBI to Mueller. Now the baton they want to have the Southern District pursue. Remember, the U.S. attorney there, the political appointee, recused himself, so you got essentially the deep state running the Southern District investigation. But, I'm glad Mrs. Clinton is back here and her spokesman is back here because they need to be asked questions about what they knew and when about this FISA process. Mrs. Clinton is as responsible for what went on here as anyone else here in Washington, D.C. And, frankly, the left is going around tearing down statues of politicians from the 1800s, but we're not allowed to ask what Hillary Clinton did and what she was involved in 2 years ago in this abuse targeting President Trump. This was as big a loss again for Hillary Clinton as it was for President Trump. So, look, the Southern District of New York, Alan is right. The harassment of President Trump will continue, but this big lie, and it was a knowing lie put out by Democrats, it was partisan, that he was involved in treason and collusion with Russia, has collapsed. So if they want to pursue low-rent, harassing investigations of President Trump, I guess that's what they'll do. But it should be given with the same skepticism as the other big lies they've been pursuing for the last 3 years.
Is that where they go? Low-rent Southern District?
Well, already what they've done is made life miserable for so many people who were close to the president when they went after these people. And look, these people committed crimes. Manafort, as Judge Ellis said, they were never interested in Manafort. They just wanted to get him to sing or compose. They weren't interested in Cohen. They weren't interested in Stone. These are just efforts to try to get at the president. That's the way special counsel operate, because they come in with a mandate to find crimes against somebody who has a target on their back. I hope that won't continue. I hope we'll have ordinary investigations in the course of events, not targeting people because of their political affiliation or closeness to the president.
All right. Well, Tom Fitton and Alan Dershowitz, thank you so much for being here this morning. Really appreciate your insight. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right, turning now to your headlines, and we begin with a Fox News alert. An off-duty officer has been shot and killed in Chicago. It happened in a River North neighborhood overnight. The officer and another man were sitting in a parked car when two suspects fired into the vehicle. The officer was shot several times and died at the hospital. Police are questioning people of interest, and they are expected to give an update on the case at any minute. Southwest, American, and United Airlines will meet with Boeing this weekend to review a software upgrade for 737 MAX jets, according to Reuters. The planes have been grounded following two deadly crashes. They are now being tested in Washington State, where they are built.
Who's getting behind next? We got to follow that. We're going to get some.
You can take a look at your bracket.
Liberty goes over the next one, they have to play Duke. So I don't think that's going to quite.
Who's taking it all?
Thank you, guys. Great questions.
Thank you.
Investors take.
Just walk off. Have a seat.
I was still here.
You can leave.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I thought you were saying goodbye.
The professor declared the show over, but
we never kick you out.
All right. The media predicted disaster for President Trump during the Mueller report.
The walls are closing in on him.
The walls close in on him.
The walls are closing in on him on Russian collusion.
How is the Trump team feeling about that probe now that it's over? Corey Lewandowski worked for his presidential campaign. He's looking very serious. The left has made the same observation about President Trump throughout the Mueller investigation. Listen.
I think that the president clearly feels all the walls closing in on him.
The president may feel the walls closing in on him.
The walls are closing in on him.
The more the walls close in on him,
the walls are closing in on him on Russian collusion.
He is terrified of the Russia investigation. He is terrified that the walls are closing in on him.
More like the walls are falling down. How is the Trump team feeling now that Robert Mueller has handed his report over to the Justice Department? Let's ask former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski. Corey, good morning. Your response.
That smile doesn't lie, Corey.
Well, Well, look, the walls are clearly not closing in, and this is a clear vindication. And what I was excited about this morning is when I woke up and the New York Times headline was, "We're sorry, Mr. Trump. We're sorry, Trump family." Oh, of course that will never happen. We will never see the apology from the mainstream media for all the things they said to malign this president about this fake Russia collusion witch hunt. The fact that Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell have been on every media outlet for the last 1 year, 10 months, and 6 days saying that they have proof of Russia collusion has now all fallen apart. And I'm very, very ready to see the apology from all of those leftists, all the socialists who accused us of crimes when the real crimes that were perpetuated were against us because of our political beliefs.
So, Corey, I appreciate that, and you're right, but there will be no apology. Yet they will move the goalposts. What do you predict comes next? Because they can't stop hating the president.
I think what's going to come next is they're going to say, well, the Mueller report was not the final. It's just a jumping off point. And now we have to have continued investigations, and we must turn the rest of this over to the Southern District of New York. And you heard Alan Dershowitz and Tom Fenton talk about this. The bottom line is the Mueller investigators did not find one individual who colluded with Russia from the campaign. There was not one indictment as it related to that. And don't forget, these are the same individuals who tried to get Dr. Jerome Corsi to sign a plea deal so that he would plead guilty to something he never did. They used Gestapo-type tactics against Americans because they didn't like our politics. But now the liberals on the left will say that we have to wait for the Southern District of New York to see if they're going to prosecute, or maybe there's something from the state of New York with the Trump Foundation. They will never let this go. They will overstep, and they will continue to move impeachment proceedings against this president for him doing nothing but fighting for Americans.
Corey, you talk about Gestapo tactics, as you say, particularly you talked about Jerome Corsi. He is an associate of Roger Stone and put out this statement. "I feel vindicated. They offered me a plea deal, which I thought was fraudulent. I did not knowingly and willfully give them information I knew was false. The fact is, I wasn't going to lie to keep myself out of prison. I did nothing wrong. It is clear I did nothing wrong, or they would have prosecuted me." You can jump in on that, but more broadly, I spoke to another Trump ally like yourself overnight who told me that once this report is out there, the gloves are going to come off, because it's not just Jerome Corsi. There's a whole bunch of other people who feel that they were pressured by Robert Mueller and his people to lie about the president.
Ed, it's cost individuals hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend themselves against crimes that they didn't commit. This was a clear overreach by the U.S. government. People in power who use their badges and their guns to go after people at the Trump campaign because they didn't like our politics, from Jim Comey to Andy McCabe. And what no one is talking about, what no one wants to remind everyone, is that this entire report was fabricated because Hillary Clinton lost the election and took $5 million of her campaign money and hired a former British spy to create this false dossier. Jim Comey should be held accountable for his abuse of power. And what you and I both think is probably pretty egregious is his op-ed in the New York Times that he said, well, look, when the report comes out, it will probably show there was no collusion. It's amazing how we just had the fortuitous timing to put that out right as the report was coming.
Corey, speaking of, the timing on that is very suspicious. But speaking of moving forward here, you talk about government overreach. Democrats have issued 80-plus subpoenas for individuals and organizations associated with President Trump. They did it because they said they couldn't wait for the Mueller report to be finished. It is now finished. They will continue to move forward with those subpoenas. How do you think the White House can react and the campaign can react to that investigation that is now coming?
Well, I have to be very clear. I was one of the 81 people who they asked for information from, and I have no information to give them. I've been clear. I've testified in front of Congress. They can go and read my transcripts. I spent 12 hours in front of the House. That's publicly. That's all available to the committee members. There is no additional information. And with all due respect to Chairman Adler, this is clearly a fishing expedition between what he's doing, what Richard Neal is doing from the Ways and Means Committee trying to get the president's taxes, and what Adam Schiff is doing at the Intelligence Committee trying to continue people to pressure them to turn against the president, to fabricate stories that don't exist. They will continue to overreach, and we will see that at the ballot box in November of 2020, because this Mueller report has clearly vindicated the president and our entire team that there was no collusion.
Corey Lewandowski, enjoy this Saturday. Appreciate it. Corey Lewandowski, appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, well, big Saturday. We're breaking down. It's real news here on Fox & Friends on this Saturday morning, as it is every Saturday morning. And Dan Bongino just tweeted he's about to drop some information about what's next on the Russia probe. New stuff. I haven't heard it. You haven't either.
Breaking news right here.
Coming up next.
And we are back with this Fox News alert. The White House and President Trump's lawyers responding to the long-awaited Mueller report, now in the hands of the Attorney General.
The report wrapping up the nearly 2-year-long Russia probe.
Arnold Garrettini is live in West Palm Beach, Florida, where the president is spending the week. Garrett, good morning.
Hey, good morning, y'all. Yeah, at this point, President Trump has not weighed in publicly reacting to the completion of the Mueller report, but around this time is often when he will start tweeting on the weekend, so we are keeping a close eye on his Twitter account. Sources close to the president, though, tell us that last night he was in a good mood, and his outside attorney, Rudy Giuliani, told Fox News, "This marks the end of the Russia investigation. We await a disclosure of the facts. We are confident that there is no finding of collusion by the president, and this underscores what the president has been saying from the beginning, that he did nothing wrong." White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders also reacted on Twitter Friday evening, saying the next steps are up to Attorney General Barr, and we look forward to the process taking its course. The White House has not received or been briefed on the special counsel's report. That is another thing we'll be watching for over the next couple of days, is how involved the White House will be in the summary of the Mueller report, which the Attorney General will be submitting to Congress if the White House decides to get involved at all. Pete, Ed, Katie?
Garrett, thank you very
much. Garrett, thank you so much.
All right, well, let's bring in Dan Bongino, Fox News contributor, author of Spygate, The Attempted Sabotage of Donald J. Trump. Dan, big morning, 675 days in. You've been all over this. Give us the overview.
Here's what everybody's missing on this thing. Yes, there's no collusion. That's not the story, okay? Everybody who's followed this case has known this for 2 years, that there's no collusion. The real problem here is Bob Mueller did a thorough investigation, tens of millions of dollars, stacked his team with Democrats, had people viciously trying to go after Donald Trump, and they could not vindicate one thing in the dossier, which we now know was nearly the entire basis of the FBI case. The really damaging thing here, again, it's not no collusion. Everybody knew that. It's that the FBI investigated the President of the United States' team based on a dossier that laid out a collusion scandal that we now know conclusively was absolute garbage.
And surveilled his campaign.
Surveilled his campaign, employed a human intelligence asset to spy on an opposing political campaign, and Bob Mueller could not vindicate one single collusion charge. How do we know that? Because he has never charged one single person with a conspiracy charge related to this Russian collusion scandal laid out in the dossier. That's the big story. I can't say this enough.
Can you talk about the political consequences of this? Because clearly the Department of Justice and the FBI were used as a political weapon for political purposes against a political campaign that they opposed. Catherine Herridge reported yesterday that the White House counsel under Obama may have been briefed on what was going on with the FISA applications, which apparently some people, the DOJ were saying, look, there may be a biased source here. We probably shouldn't move forward with this. But is this just an overall picture of what happens when the federal government is used as a political weapon for political reasons?
Great point. The Catherine Herridge piece, I think it's up at foxnews.com. It's a must read. So we have new texts now from Andy McCabe to Lisa Page. And in one of those texts specifically in October, before the election, McCabe is referencing a meeting at the White House, including the deputy director of the CIA, about this case. Think about how devastating this is now. They format and base their entire case on a dossier we now know is complete garbage, alleging a Russian collusion scandal with Carter Page that never happened. And now we know from these McCabe texts that the White House is intimately involved in this the entire time. They basically had a movie script, a fake movie script they followed on Donald Trump that was nonsense. It was a fiction tale that they used, as you accurately stated, Ed, to spy on, weaponize their intelligence assets.
So you're suggesting the fingerprints of the Obama White House may be on this, which may explain why John Brennan has been out there making all kinds of wild charges about treason.
And Comey.
And James Comey is what I want to get to, because look at what he did in June of 2017, and then we'll talk about it.
I woke up in the middle of the night on Monday night, because it didn't dawn on me originally, that there might be corroboration for our conversation. There might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
Okay, so Bottom line, James Comey was involved in that surveillance that you're talking about to connect all of this, the FISA warrants. He's the man in charge of the FBI. The FBI and the Justice Department have to go to that FISA court that Alan Dershowitz was talking about. They used the phony dossier to get the surveillance. So you have that. But what he's talking about there in the summer of 2017 is that he wrote these memos about his conversations with the president and used an outsider to leak them to force the appointment of a special counsel. What does that tell us?
Jim Comey, of all the reputational damage done yesterday to all John Brennan, the Barack Obama team, Jim Comey leaves this in complete tatters. His reputation is finished. Why? Think about this now. Let's put multiple prongs for Comey. He's the FBI director when they initiate an investigation based on a false dossier. He signs off on one of the FISA warrants to spy on an opposing presidential campaign. He then gets fired, leaks information, a completely dishonest technique to get a special counsel appointed that finds what? Nothing based on the charges he investigated the president on. Now, Ed, there's an important point. Here's the key takeaway. Comey has very sincere, devastating liability here. Why? Because the FBI has a procedure. It's called the Woods procedure. People have to sign off that the information you raise your right hand and swear to in the courts. Remember the Woods file. This is going to come up. People have to sign off that the information is true. There are people's names that signed on this thing, including, by the way, John Carlin, who was the Department of Justice National Security Director, who was one of the final guys who signed off on it. He was conveniently...
Explain that. You're saying that FBI and justice officials have to swear that what they're presenting to the FISA court is true and accurate?
The dossier components that were in the FISA that someone at the FBI, an affiant, swore to were true, has a Woods file attached to it where people have to sign off that they have verified it. People that signed off on this all have extreme liability. They signed basically a fake file.
So will they be held accountable?
Yes, this is where they're all in trouble. And Carlin, who was one of the last guys in that, was conveniently Bob Mueller's old chief of staff. I tell you, and wait for the next shoe to drop too. And this is where this is going to get ugly now.
Yeah.
Now that Mueller's finished with this investigation, mark my words on this show, watch for the Ukraine thing to drop next. That's the real collusion scandal.
And Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham is also investigating FISA abuse, so we will cover that, I'm sure, as he holds hearings about what happened. Dan Bongino, thank you so much.
Yeah, that was fun. Nice.
All right, the Mueller report wrapped up, and Democratic presidential hopefuls have picked their narrative. Release the report. How will it impact 2020? We'll debate that up next.
Welcome back. From total transparency to release the full report, Democrat presidential hopefuls have picked their new narrative. Will Mueller's findings have any impact on the 2020 election? Here to debate, Buck Sexton, host of the Buck Sexton radio show and former CIA analyst, and Antoine Seawright, a Democratic strategist. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Buck, I'm going to start with you. What does a day like today matter for 2020?
Well, Pete, I think there's going to have to be a reckoning here. The American people have been told for 2 years that it was very likely, at least according to many in the media, most of the media, and certainly the Democratic Party, it was very likely that President Trump was either colluding or had colluded with Russia and was somebody who needed to be possibly prosecuted as President of the United States. I mean, this is utterly insane, but this became mainstream thinking. And for the Democratic Party, politically speaking, going forward, I think that they should have to answer for this because the evidence was so paltry all along. The theory was so bizarre and so unlikely and contra the evidence, and that should affect the way Americans feel about the Democratic Party's judgment across the board.
Antoine, should Democrats have to answer for that? We don't know. I know what you're going to say. We don't know exactly what's in the report. Get it. But there's no indictment of the president. There's no indication there's collusion. Should Democrats answer for that?
Well, Pete, I've been very clear from the start, and I think I even shared this with you one time in this program. We should just wait to see what happens. And I know my friend Buckton wants to give the premature benediction on what this report will be, but we don't know. So we can't speculate or talk about what we don't know. And so at the end of the day, I think we should wait. I think what you'll hear from Democrats is while Republicans want to play hide and go seek, we want transparency. And so this report should be issued. It should be public.
So let's get ahead of ourselves.
Can I speak to my friend Antoine?
No, hold on.
What we don't know?
You will. Antoine, let's just say it is released and the evidence is of no collusion. Are you prepared to move on, Antoine?
I am personally, and at the end of the day, I don't think Democrats, whether it's a party or whether you're a 2020 person, should be focused on Mueller, because I don't think our success is based on what happens in this report. I think our success will be on how we talk about how we move this country forward. And I think the Mueller investigation was just one part of what I think we need to know about what happened in 2016 so we can prevent this from happening again if there was something in the report that says that because of what happened in 2016, it impacted our elections, which we already know it did.
Buck, go ahead.
I was going to say Antoine's position is more reasonable, I have to say, than I think what you'll see from a lot of Democrats.
I'm not running for president, but
who are not going to want to move along at all. They are absolutely not going to say that this is now proven. I mean, we've gone from St. Mueller will get the answers and justice to the American people to as soon as this report, the conclusions are finalized and out and the American people know what they are, you're going to hear a lot of the Southern District of New York, or maybe we should see Trump's taxes. All these other follow-on investigations.
But that's why I said you should not give the premature benediction, because there are other people investigating and doing other things, but we also do that now.
It's not premature. It's not really possible at this point, Antoine. Even putting aside that Russia collusion was insane as a theory from the beginning, it's not really possible that you could have Mueller end the investigation at this point with no additional prosecutions if there was any criminal conspiracy between any member of the Trump campaign, the president himself, and Russian actors. So
again, what we don't know is what we don't know.
But Antoine, you would have to acknowledge if there was something there we would know about at this point, either through the investigation or through
No, Pete and Buck, listen, I'm not going to talk about what I don't know, so I'm not going to do that. But I will say, do not close your ears to the fact that Congress will hold this administration accountable.
Oh, my ears are wide open, and I know Bucks are waiting for an apology. No, Antoine, thank you very much.
Hurry up and wait.
Thank you, guys. All right, hurry up and wait. We know a lot about that in the Army. All right, Attorney General Bill Barr now promising to follow the law. A former DOJ lawyer is next to talk about the AG's message, revealed in a
report now in the hands of Attorney General William Barr and a small number of close aides who will decide what happens next, including if it will be made public.
Are there any hints on what he'll decide from the letter he sent to Capitol Hill? Here to break it down is former DOJ lawyer Hans von Spakovsky. Hans, what's your response to this?
Well, Barr's made it very clear he's going to do exactly what the regulations say he's supposed to do. And what everyone needs to keep in mind is that this is a confidential report. That's true of all reports that prosecutors make in all criminal investigations. What the regulations say is he can release parts of the report or all of it if it's in the public interest. And I think what he's going to do is he's going to look at this, and if there are any unproven allegations or criticisms made in the report, it's not in the public interest to release those. Prosecutors are not supposed to make claims against individuals unless they're going to lead to a prosecution and they can prove them in court. Keep in mind, one of the reasons James Comey was fired, remember, was because he came out and said, well, there's insufficient evidence to prosecute Hillary Clinton, but then he criticized her. That broke DOJ protocols. Prosecutors are not supposed to do that.
Hans, here's an excerpt from part of Bill Barr's letter. He talked about transparency. He said, I intend to consult with Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein and Special Counsel Mueller to determine what other information from the report can be released to Congress and the public consistent with the law. I remain committed to as much transparency as possible. You think they'll hew to that?
Yeah, I think they will. To the extent that the report says that particular allegations that are made are not true, I think that's going to come out. But again, if there's any criticism that Mueller has put in that he couldn't prove and it wasn't sufficient for a prosecution, I don't think he'll allow that to come out. And that, in fact, is the way he should behave.
What's the balance between redaction and the public backlash or the way it will be perceived if it's heavily redacted?
Well, I think the Attorney General, when it comes to redaction, should explain. If there are redactions, it's because those are unproven allegations made against an individual. And that would be fundamentally unfair to allow that to come out because those individuals don't have the chance to prove that they aren't true in a court of law.
All right.
So Democrats
Unproven
have
allegations against an individual. Never heard of that before.
Right.
Hans,
Hans, thank you so
thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it. All right, our coverage of the Mueller report and its fallout continues. We've got Bret Baier coming up, Mike Huckabee, Jason Chaffetz, Lara Logan, Greg Jarrett. His book had a roadmap, maybe to where we're headed on all this. They're all coming up live.